My best friend met my new girlfriend for the first time, and her reaction made me question everything. I'd been planning this dinner for 3 weeks, carefully orchestrating the moment when the two most important women in my life would finally meet. Vanessa had been my best friend since sophomore year of college, the person who knew every version of me, who'd seen me through bad breakups and worse decisions. And Isla was everything I'd been looking for without knowing I was searching, smart and funny and kind in ways that made me want to be better. They were going to love each other. I was certain of it. I'd picked a restaurant downtown that had good lighting and a menu diverse enough to accommodate everyone's preferences. I'd arrived early, claimed a corner booth, ordered drinks. When Vanessa walked in at exactly 7, I stood to hug her like I always did, but something felt off immediately. Her smile was tight, her body stiff when I pulled her close. She slid into the booth across from me and ordered whiskey neat, which wasn't unusual except it was only 7 on a Thursday. Rough day? I asked, trying to read her expression. She worked as a data analyst for a tech company, and her job involved long hours staring at spreadsheets and dealing with executives who didn't understand statistics. Something like that, she said, her fingers drumming against the table in a pattern I recognized as stress. I wanted to ask more, but Isla texted that she was parking, so I shifted focus to making sure the evening went smoothly. When Isla appeared in the restaurant doorway, my chest did that thing it always did, that stupid flutter that made me feel like a teenager. She wore a green dress that made her eyes look impossible, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She spotted us and smiled, weaving through tables with graceful confidence. I stood again to greet her, kissing her cheek and pulling out the chair beside me. Isla, this is Vanessa. Vanessa, Isla. They shook hands across the table, and I watched for that moment of recognition, that instant connection between people who both cared about me. It didn't come. Vanessa's handshake was brief, almost perfunctory. Isla's smile faltered slightly before she recovered, sliding into her seat and picking up her menu. I've heard so much about you, Isla said, her voice warm despite Vanessa's coolness. Garrett talks about you constantly. He says you're the one who convinced him to finally graduate instead of changing majors for the 3rd time. She laughed, trying to break the ice. Vanessa's expression didn't change. He exaggerates. He would have figured it out eventually. The waiter appeared, taking Isla's drink order and giving us time to peruse the menu. I tried to fill the awkward silence with commentary about the restaurant, pointing out dishes I'd heard were good, making jokes that fell flat. Isla engaged enthusiastically, asking questions and making appropriate responses. Vanessa stared at her menu like it contained classified information. When the waiter returned, we ordered appetizers and entrees, and I suggested sharing the bruschetta and calamari. Vanessa said she wasn't hungry for appetizers. The drinks came, and I raised my glass in a toast. To new friendships and old ones, to the 2 most amazing women I know. Isla clinked her glass against mine with a genuine smile. Vanessa lifted hers without making eye contact, took a long drink, and set it down harder than necessary. Isla tried again, asking Vanessa about her work, her hobbies, anything to establish common ground. Vanessa's answers came out clipped and minimal. Yes, she liked her job. No, she didn't have time for many hobbies. Sure, she'd seen that movie. Every response was a wall, a rejection of connection. I watched Isla's confusion grow with each failed attempt at conversation. She kept glancing at me with questions in her eyes, wondering if she'd done something wrong, if Vanessa was always like this. I told her so many stories about Vanessa's warmth and humor, her ability to make friends anywhere, her generosity with her time and energy. This person sitting across from us bore no resemblance to those descriptions. By the time the food arrived, the tension at our table was thick enough to choke on. Other diners laughed and talked around us while we sat in uncomfortable silence, broken only by the scraping of forks against plates. I tried to keep conversation flowing, asking Vanessa about her upcoming trip to visit her sister in Portland, asking Isla about the project she was managing at work. But it felt like conducting an interview rather than facilitating a conversation. Vanessa barely touched her pasta, pushing it around her plate while she worked through a second whiskey. Isla ate slowly, clearly losing her appetite but too polite to say anything. I'd lost mine entirely. My stomach twisted with anxiety about why this was going so catastrophically wrong. Isla excused herself to the restroom, and the moment she was out of earshot, I leaned forward. What's going on with you? You're being incredibly rude. Vanessa's eyes finally met mine, and what I saw there wasn't coldness, but something more complicated, something that looked almost like grief. I can't do this, Garrett. I can't sit here and pretend. Her voice was low, urgent. Pretend what? Pretend to be civil to someone I care about? That's literally all I'm asking. She shook her head, draining her glass. You don't understand. You don't see what I see. Before I could ask what she meant, Isla returned, and Vanessa immediately shut down again, retreating behind her walls. The rest of dinner passed in painful slow motion, every minute feeling like an hour. When the check came, I paid quickly, eager to end this disaster. Outside the restaurant, Isla hugged Vanessa goodbye with genuine warmth, despite everything. It was really nice meeting you. I hope we can do this again sometime. Vanessa's response was barely audible. Sure. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. Call me tomorrow. We need to talk. Then she walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Isla and me standing on the sidewalk in the cooling October air. Isla turned to me, trying to smile, but failing. That was rough. Did I do something wrong? Is she okay? I pulled her close, kissing her forehead, trying to reassure her when I had no answers. She's just going through something. It's not you, I promise. But as I drove Isla home, those words echoed hollow. Vanessa's reaction wasn't about work stress or a bad mood. It was specific, targeted, deliberate. She'd looked at Isla like she was a threat, like her presence was causing Vanessa physical pain. And that didn't make sense unless there was something I was missing. Some piece of information that would make everything click into place. I dropped Isla at her apartment, promising to call her later, then drove aimlessly for an hour trying to process what had happened. My phone buzzed multiple times with texts from Vanessa, each one more insistent. We need to talk tonight. This can't wait. Please call me. It's important. I finally pulled over in a grocery store parking lot and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring, her voice strained. Can you come over? I can't do this over the phone. 20 minutes later, I was standing in her apartment while she paced her living room, wringing her hands. I'd been here countless times, knew every piece of furniture, every photo on her walls, every quirk of her space. But tonight, it felt foreign, charged with an energy I didn't recognize. I'm sorry about dinner, she started, not looking at me. I tried to be normal, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about what I knew and whether I should tell you, and every time she smiled at you, I felt sick. My stomach dropped. What do you know? What are you talking about? She finally stopped pacing, turning to face me directly. I know Isla. Not from tonight. From before. The words didn't process immediately. I stared at Vanessa, waiting for clarification that would make sense of that impossible statement. What do you mean you know her? From where? Vanessa pulled out her phone, scrolling through something before handing it to me. On the screen was a Facebook photo from 3 years ago. Vanessa at some outdoor festival with a group of friends. And there, partially visible in the background, was someone who looked exactly like Isla. That's from the music festival in Austin, the one I went to right after graduation. My hands felt numb holding the phone. Okay, so you were at the same festival 3 years ago. There were thousands of people there. That doesn't mean you know her. Vanessa shook her head, taking the phone back and pulling up another photo. This one clearer. Isla sitting at a picnic table with Vanessa's group, laughing at something someone said. She was dating my friend Connor. They'd been together for almost a year at that point. She came to the festival with our whole group, stayed in our rental house, spent the entire weekend with us. I felt like the floor was tilting under me. That can't be right. Isla's never been to Texas. She told me she's never traveled much, mostly stayed in the Northeast. Vanessa's expression was a mixture of frustration and pity. I'm telling you, this is her. Same name, same face, same voice. I recognized her the second she walked into the restaurant. I spent 4 days with this woman 3 years ago, Garrett. We shared a bathroom, made breakfast together, stayed up late talking about relationships. I know it's her. My mind raced through conversations I'd had with Isla, trying to reconcile Vanessa's claims with what I knew. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe there's someone who looks like her. Connor tagged her in all the photos. Her full name is Isla Reeves. I checked before dinner because I needed to be sure I wasn't crazy. She pulled up Instagram, showing me Connor's account and the archived photos from that festival. And there was Isla, unmistakably Isla, her arm around Connor, kissing his cheek in one photo, dancing with the group in another. My throat felt tight. Why wouldn't she mention this? Why would she lie about never being to Texas? Vanessa sat on her couch, suddenly looking exhausted. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Maybe she didn't remember me specifically. We weren't that close. But the fact that she didn't mention dating Connor when she must know you and I are friends, that's weird. That's really weird. I scrolled through the photos, studying every detail, looking for proof this was someone else. But it wasn't. The tattoo on her left wrist was identical, a small compass she'd told me she got after college to remind herself to keep exploring, the scar above her right eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way she tilted her head when she laughed. This was Isla, 3 years ago, in a completely different context than anything she'd ever mentioned. Did they break up badly? Was there drama? Vanessa thought for a moment. I don't think so. They were together for a while after the festival. Connor moved to Seattle for work maybe 6 months later, and I think the long distance killed it. But it seemed amicable from what he said. They just grew apart. I sat next to Vanessa, my head spinning. So she dated your friend, came to this festival with your whole group, then never mentioned any of it when she started dating me months ago. Even though she had to have known you and I were close based on how much I talk about you. Vanessa nodded slowly. That's what doesn't make sense. If it was ancient history and meaningless, why hide it? Why lie about Texas? I pulled out my phone and looked at Isla's Instagram, scrolling back 3 years. There was a gap in her posts around the festival dates, nothing for almost 2 weeks. Before and after that gap, her posts showed her apartment in Boston, her friends, her daily life. Nothing about Texas, Nothing about Connor. No trace of that trip. Maybe she deleted those posts, I said, grasping for explanations. People clean up their social media all the time. Vanessa leaned back against the cushions. Maybe. Or maybe she's hiding something bigger. I wanted to tell you at dinner, but I couldn't figure out how without blowing everything up. And then I kept watching her be all sweet and perfect, and I kept thinking about how calculated that felt if she knew exactly who I was. The thought made my chest hurt. You think she knew you'd be there tonight? That she recognized you? Vanessa's expression was uncertain. I don't know. She didn't react when you introduced us, but she's good at controlling her expressions. I watched her all night. She never slipped, never showed any recognition. Either she genuinely doesn't remember me, or she's an incredible actress. I stayed at Vanessa's apartment until almost midnight, going through every photo, every detail, trying to build a picture of who Isla had been 3 years ago. In those pictures, she looked younger, wilder somehow, her style different, her energy more chaotic. The woman I knew was put together, professional, thoughtful, but people changed. 3 years was long enough for someone to evolve, to become someone new, except the lying part. That was harder to explain away. When I finally left, I didn't go straight home. I drove to Isla's apartment and sat in my car outside her building for 20 minutes, staring at her lit windows, trying to decide what to do. Confronting her now felt wrong, going in angry with accusations. But pretending everything was fine felt impossible after what Vanessa had shown me. I texted Isla that I was tired and heading home, that I'd call her tomorrow. She responded immediately with hearts and sweet dreams, the same kind of message she always sent. I read it 3 times, searching for deception in the words, finding nothing but the same warmth I'd always known from her. At home, I pulled out my laptop and did what I probably should have done months ago. I searched for Isla online, really searched, not just the casual social media browsing I'd done when we first started dating. I found her LinkedIn showing her career progression. Nothing suspicious. Her Facebook was mostly private, showing only the generic information she'd shared, but I noticed her friends list, scrolling through the names until I found Connor Hayes. They were still friends on Facebook, even though, according to her, she'd never had any serious relationships before me. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on anything except the growing list of inconsistencies in Isla's story. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text history, reading months of conversations with new suspicious eyes. She'd been deliberately vague about her past, I realized now. Anytime I'd asked about previous relationships, she'd changed the subject or given non-answers. I thought it was because she was private, not because she was hiding something. When she texted around 9 asking if I was feeling okay, I told her I had a stomach bug and would probably lay low all day. She offered to bring me soup, and I declined, saying I just needed to sleep. The lie came easily, which bothered me more than it should have. Around 11, my phone rang with Connor's name on the screen. I'd found his number through mutual connections and had texted him earlier asking if we could talk. Hey man, got your message. What's up? His voice was friendly, casual, completely unaware of the bomb he might be about to drop. I tried to keep my voice steady. I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to ask you about Isla Reeves. Silence on the other end, then a long exhale. Wow, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. How do you know Isla? I explained that we'd been dating for 4 months, that I'd just found out they'd been together years ago through Vanessa. Connor made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. Small world. Yeah, Isla and I dated for about 1.5 years. Why are you asking? I chose my words carefully. She never mentioned you, or Texas, or knowing anyone in Vanessa's circle, and I'm trying to figure out why. Another pause, longer this time. That's weird. We weren't a secret. It wasn't a bad breakup or anything. We just couldn't make long-distance work when I moved to Seattle. He hesitated. Actually, that's not entirely true. The breakup was fine, but there was some stuff toward the end that was complicated. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of stuff? Connor seemed to be choosing his words. Look, I don't want to trash talk someone's girlfriend, but since you're asking, Isla had this pattern of reinventing herself. Like, she'd tell different people different versions of her past depending on what she thought they wanted to hear. Can you give me an example? My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. Connor continued. She told my parents she grew up in Vermont on a horse farm. Super rural upbringing. She told Vanessa's group she was from Boston and had always been a city person. She told me initially she'd never had a serious boyfriend before me, then later admitted she'd been engaged in college. Little lies that didn't really matter individually, but together painted this picture of someone who wasn't comfortable with who she actually was. I felt sick. Did you ever figure out what was true? Connor laughed without humor. Not really. Toward the end, I started fact-checking things she'd say, and I'd find inconsistencies. When I confronted her about it, she'd get defensive and turn it around, making me feel like I was being controlling for asking questions. We talked for another 30 minutes, and Connor painted a picture of someone I barely recognized. The Isla he described was insecure and attention-seeking, willing to reshape her entire history to fit whatever narrative she thought would be most appealing. She'd lied about her job, her education, her family situation, All small enough lies that individually seemed meaningless, but collectively suggested someone fundamentally dishonest. Why did you stay with her so long if you knew she was lying? I asked, genuinely curious. Connor sighed. Because when things were good, they were really good. She was fun and smart and made me feel like the most important person in the world. And I kept thinking, if I just loved her enough, she'd feel safe enough to be honest. But that's not how it works. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at nothing, processing everything I'd learned. I'd been dating Isla for 4 months. In that time, she'd told me she grew up in Maine, was an only child, had never been married or engaged, had only been to a handful of states, and had never had a relationship longer than a few months. Based on Connor's information and Vanessa's photos, at least 3 of those things were verifiably false. How much else had she lied about? And more importantly, why? What was she hiding or running from? I needed to talk to her, but I needed more information first. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I spent the afternoon calling people, Vanessa's friends who'd been at that festival, Connor's roommate from Seattle, even reaching out to someone who'd gone to college with Isla based on her LinkedIn. Each conversation added new pieces to a puzzle that looked increasingly disturbing. Multiple people described the same pattern. Isla presenting different versions of herself, contradicting previous stories, getting defensive when questioned. One woman, Julia, who'd been her roommate junior year, told me Isla had pretended to be pre-med even though she was majoring in communications, going so far as to buy medical textbooks and study them in common areas to maintain the fiction. When Julia asked why, Isla said she didn't want people to judge her for her actual major. By evening, I had pages of notes, a timeline of lies and inconsistencies that painted a picture of someone with a serious issue with honesty and identity. The question was what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand explanations and see if she'd finally tell the truth. Another part wanted to just end it, to walk away from someone who'd built our entire relationship on deception. But I also felt like I deserved to understand why. Why me? Why these specific lies? What was she getting from constructing this elaborate false narrative? I called Vanessa and talked through everything I'd learned. She listened quietly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. I think you need to talk to her, Vanessa finally said. But don't do it angry. Go in calm and just present the facts. Give her a chance to explain before you make any decisions. She was right. But the thought of seeing Isla, of looking into those eyes that I'd thought were honest and finding out they'd been lying to me for months, made me feel physically ill. I texted Isla asking if I could come over, that we needed to talk. She responded immediately, sensing something was wrong from my tone. Is everything okay? You're scaring me. I told her I'd be there in 20 minutes, that we just needed to have a conversation. I drove to her apartment with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd present everything I'd learned without it turning into accusations and defensiveness. Isla opened the door before I could knock, her face etched with concern. What's going on? You've been weird all day. I walked past her into the living room, not trusting myself to touch her or be close to her until I had answers. I need you to be completely honest with me about something. Can you do that? She nodded slowly, sitting on the edge of her couch. Of course. What is it? I took a breath. Do you know who Vanessa is? Not from last night? From before. I watched her face carefully, looking for recognition, for guilt, for anything that would tell me the truth. Her expression stayed confused. No, I'd never met her before dinner. Why? The lie came so easily from her, so naturally, that it almost convinced me despite everything I knew. Almost. That's interesting, I said, keeping my voice level, because I have photos of you with her 3 years ago at a music festival in Austin. You were dating Connor Hayes at the time. The color drained from Isla's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again without sound coming out. Finally, she whispered, I can explain. I waited, giving her space to either tell the truth or dig deeper. She stood, pacing to the window and back, her hands shaking. I did know Vanessa. I recognized her immediately at dinner, but I couldn't say anything because then you'd ask how we knew each other, and I'd have to explain about Connor. And I didn't want you to know about him. Her words came out rushed, desperate. Why wouldn't you want me to know about a relationship that ended years ago? She wrapped her arms around herself. Because Connor knows things about me, about my past, that I didn't want you to find out. I've worked really hard to move past that version of myself, and seeing Vanessa brought it all back. I kept my voice calm, even though everything in me wanted to scream. What things? What version of yourself? Isla's eyes filled with tears. I was different back then. I made mistakes. I told stories that weren't entirely true because I was young and stupid and wanted people to like me, but I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. The tears felt like manipulation now, a tool she'd probably used before to avoid accountability. Except you're still lying. You lied about Texas. You lied about knowing Vanessa. You lied about never having a serious relationship. Those are current lies, Isla, not past mistakes. She sat back down, her face crumpling. I know I should have been honest from the beginning. But every time I tried to tell you the truth, I was terrified you'd see me differently. I love you, Garrett. These 4 months have been the happiest of my life. I didn't want to ruin it. I felt something hard and cold settling in my chest. You didn't ruin it by having a past. You ruined it by lying about everything. I spent today talking to people you knew years ago, and every single one of them told me the same thing. You have a pattern of creating false narratives about who you are, different stories for different people, and when you get caught, you deflect and make the other person feel guilty for questioning you. Isla's face shifted from tears to something harder, defensive. Who did you talk to? You had no right to go digging into my past without talking to me first. I had every right, I said, my calm starting to crack. You've been lying to me since we met. I deserve to know who I'm actually in a relationship with, except I'm not sure you even know the answer to that question. She stood abruptly. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd judge me. I knew you'd go running to your precious Vanessa and let her poison you against me. She never liked me, even back then. She always looked at me like I wasn't good enough for Connor. I almost laughed at the absurdity. This isn't about Vanessa. This is about you and your inability to be honest. Do you even realize how many different versions of your life story you've told me? You said you grew up in Maine. Julia said you're actually from New Jersey. You said you were an only child. Connor said you have 2 younger brothers you never talked to. Isla's eyes widened. You talked to Julia and Connor? You had no right. She was yelling now, tears gone, replaced by anger. You violated my privacy. You went behind my back and talked to people from my past about me. That's manipulative and controlling. I stood too, matching her energy. Don't turn this around on me. I asked you a simple question. If you knew Vanessa, you could have been honest. Instead, you lied directly to my face and made me question my own perception of reality. That's manipulation, Isla. What I did was try to understand why the person I love has been lying to me since day one. We stared at each other across her living room, and I saw a stranger. Not the woman I'd been falling for, but someone desperate and cornered, willing to say anything to maintain control of the narrative. I never lied about the important things, she said, her voice dropping back to pleading. My feelings for you are real. Everything we've built together is real. The past doesn't matter. Why can't you just let it go? I shook my head slowly. Because the past does matter. It matters because it shows pattern and character. It matters because if you lied about all these small things, how can I trust you about the big things? What else haven't you told me? Are you actually divorced? Is Isla even your real name? I was spiraling now, questioning everything. She stepped toward me, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. Garrett, please, I'll tell you everything. The complete truth, I promise. Just give me a chance to explain it all properly. I don't think I can hear anything you say right now and believe it. The words came out quieter than I intended, but they landed with weight. Isla's face crumpled again, and this time the tears seemed more genuine. So that's it? 4 months and you're just done? You won't even give me a chance to make this right? I thought about Connor's words, about staying because the good times were good, thinking love would be enough to fix fundamental dishonesty. I don't think you can make this right. I think you need to figure out why you feel the need to lie about who you are before you can be in a healthy relationship with anyone. And I think I need to figure out why I missed all the red flags, why I chose to ignore the inconsistencies in your stories. I moved toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Where are you going? Isla followed me, panic in her voice. We need to talk about this more. You can't just leave. I turned at the door. Actually, I can. And I should have left the moment I felt that first doubt, that first sense that something wasn't quite right. But I ignored it because I wanted you to be who you were pretending to be. I opened the door and she grabbed my arm. I love you. Doesn't that count for something? I gently removed her hand from my arm. I don't know if you love me or if you love the version of yourself you get to be with me. And I don't think you know either. I walked out, leaving her standing in her doorway. And this time I didn't look back to see if she was crying or angry or anything else. I just left. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I called Vanessa on the way, and she answered on the first ring. How did it go? I gave her the abbreviated version while navigating traffic, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. She admitted to lying, tried to justify it, then got angry when I called her out. Textbook pattern Connor described. Vanessa made a sympathetic sound. I'm sorry. I know that's not the outcome you wanted. I pulled into my parking space, sitting in the dark car. I wanted her to have a good explanation. I wanted there to be some reasonable justification that would make this all make sense. But there wasn't. She's just someone who lies as easily as breathing, and I fell for it completely. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. You fell for the person she was pretending to be. That's not your fault. Over the next few days, Isla tried everything. Texts, calls, emails, showing up at my apartment. Each time her story changed slightly, adapting to whatever she thought would work. She claimed she was protecting me from her traumatic past. Then she said she was embarrassed about her working-class background. Then she admitted she had a problem with truth-telling but was getting therapy. Each version felt like another manipulation, another attempt to find the right combination of words that would make me forgive her and forget. I stopped responding after the first day. Vanessa helped me block Isla on all platforms. giving me the space I needed to process without constant bombardment. Connor reached out to check on me, sharing his own experience with the aftermath of dating Isla and offering solidarity that was surprisingly comforting. 2 weeks later, I was having coffee with Vanessa when she said something that shifted my perspective. You know what's sad? Isla probably isn't even a malicious person. She's just so uncomfortable with herself that she creates these fictions, and eventually, she starts believing her own lies. I stirred my coffee, thinking about that. Does that make it better or worse? Vanessa considered the question. Neither. It just makes it tragic. She'll keep doing this with every person she dates until she deals with whatever core issue makes her feel like she's not enough as she is. I realized Vanessa was right. Isla wasn't a villain. She was just someone deeply broken in ways I couldn't fix, operating from a place of such profound insecurity that honesty felt like exposure rather than intimacy. 3 months later, I started seeing Vanessa's friend Mira, someone I'd met at a group dinner and who'd asked me out with straightforward honesty that felt revolutionary after Isla. On our third date, Mira told me about her messy divorce and her complicated relationship with her mother and her struggles with anxiety. The vulnerability felt terrifying and refreshing in equal measure. When I asked why she was being so open so quickly, she laughed. Because I spent years pretending to be someone I wasn't in my marriage. It nearly destroyed me. Now I figure if you're going to like me, you might as well like the real version. If not, at least we didn't waste time. I told her about Isla then, the whole story, and she listened without judgment. That must have made it hard to trust anyone after. I nodded. It did. But you being honest about your mess makes me want to be honest about mine. 6 months after the disaster dinner with Isla and Vanessa, I ran into Connor at a concert. We grabbed drinks afterward, and he told me Isla had moved to Denver, apparently reinventing herself yet again with a new job and new story. I saw her Instagram, he said. She's presenting herself as a corporate executive when I know for a fact she works in administrative support. Same pattern, new audience. I felt sad more than angry. Somewhere out there, Isla was still running from herself, still believing the fiction was safer than the truth. I went home that night and called Mira, telling her I was falling for her, and it scared me. She said she was scared too, but maybe that was the point. Maybe real connection required the courage to be vulnerable, to show the messy, imperfect truth, and trust someone else to meet you there with their own truth. That night, I finally deleted all the photos of Isla from my phone, letting go of the fantasy of who I'd thought she was, and accepting the reality of what had actually been there, smoke and mirrors and desperate performance, beautiful and broken and ultimately empty. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.